So there's a man on the loose in Toronto who just killed another guy on Wednesday with a machete. This 45-year-old man, Nadar Fadal, and he was walking with his mother, and I guess he got in an argument with him just randomly on the street. And the guy pulled out a machete and slashed, and then the guy eventually succumbed to his injuries on the way to the hospital. But what the fuck is going on in Toronto, first of all? Like, people are dying by machetes now. Like, this is happening more and more. I keep hearing in the news at least a few times more a year. It's like, oh, this person got killed by machete. This person got killed by machete. It's like, okay, this is what happens when you import a bunch of third worlders into your country. You get behavior, you get shit like this. This is why multiculturalism fails and fucks up, because now we have like Pakistan in Canada. You have people like pulling out machetes, and eventually we're gonna have people being like stoned in the streets or something, like like in like 20 years from now. But this is insane, and what's really annoying is a lot of news agencies, the Toronto Police Service, they say, oh, give us information about this person so we can find them. But none of them tell us the guy's height. They don't tell us his race or anything. And usually it happens. Usually they don't tell us when the person is a person of color, which in this case they are. I had to do some searching, but surprisingly, the Star gave me his race. He's 5'11", brown, and a blue shirt. But brown doesn't really tell you too much, because it tells you he's not black, but he's most likely, I don't know, an Arab guy, and the guy killed another Arab looking guy. So it's probably in an area of town that is with a bunch of Arab people or something. So it could narrow that down, and that is useful information. You'd think the police, the Toronto Police Service online, would want to tell us this information so we could narrow the search and find this guy faster. But no, this social justice bullshit, this SJW nonsense, is preventing us from finding and capturing criminals because we're unwilling to say anything about their race. But I'm sure they would say something if he was white, or like, white man on the loose after shooting these people, right? Like they're gonna say that time. But if it's anybody else, that's gonna be racist, and we're not allowed to do that. So we'll just say, looking for a man. Just find us a man who did this, and if you got information, let us know. But it's like, man, if you really want the public to help, please give us a little bit more information, especially when you should have that, right? So it's insane that what is going on in Toronto right now. This is why Faith Goldie desperately needs to win, but honestly, unfortunately, I don't think she has too much of a chance considering the demographics in Toronto. Like, maybe she does. Maybe I'm wrong. I really hope I am. But also mix that in with the fact that the media is giving her zero attention whatsoever. That is not going to help her either. So it's just going to get worse in Toronto. Things are going to get worse and worse. It's eventually going to look like London, and you're going to see a massive exodus out of Toronto eventually, and it's going to be just overrun. And that will be the example of what not to do. Like, it'll be the rest of Canada's example. It's like, okay, all right, things have gone to shit, and probably Toronto will be one of the things that separates Canada eventually, because if things keep going the way they're going, like everybody in Ontario is going to become a minority eventually, and people are going to leave. As white people become more and more a minority, they're going to feel more and more alienated, and they're going to leave to other provinces. And then you're eventually going to have like a separation of Canada, of a bunch of different mini provinces that are all now their own little mini countries, and maybe that will be best in the end. But that is kind of what I see happening in the future for Toronto, and it's not going to be pretty, right? You're like we're already seeing the rise in crime that is going on in Toronto right now. You got all these different people from all these different cultures, and it's not going to mix well. It isn't. The majority of the crime that is happening in Toronto is not coming from white people, okay? The majority of it is not. Look into it. Look in the past 10, 20, 30 fucking murders in Toronto and stuff, and you will see. And the murder rate in Toronto is surpassing that of New York. And I'm not saying, me saying this is not saying, oh, brown people are violent and all this shit and are naturally this way, but hey, like we see what's going on in Toronto, like, and what are people to think things are going to look like when the only example we have for how other nations are functioning right now, or are the nations that exist in the world right now. We're like, a bunch of people come from Somalia. We're like, oh, well, they're just gonna become Canadians one day, and if they eventually replace us, Canada's gonna be exactly the same, but it'll just be with Somalians. I don't know. I think Somalia looks the way it does because of Somalians. I think a lot of these countries look the way they do because it is a representation somewhat of those people themselves. If they have a massive communist country, it's because they want a massively communist type country, right? Like, if they're coming from, if we're bringing all these people in and not really having them come in to adopt to Canadian values, which people are like, oh, we don't have any, or whatever, but we do. It's like, if they're just coming in with their culture, eventually the country it's gonna look like their country, because they're gonna want to make it look like theirs. And then you're gonna have a bunch of these little groups that are almost equally represented within the government, right? Equally trying to fight for control of the government. Like, there'll be like a million Chinese people, a million Arabs, a million white people, a million black people. And the thing is culturally, all these people want slightly different things, right? We all want basically the same things: security, happiness, love, and all this stuff. But people from different races and cultures, they do want different things collectively, in a sense. And to have more stability, if you have a bunch of like half Muslims and half Christians in your country, it's not going to be very stable, because Christians, they want a completely different life, and they follow completely different values, and they want to structure the government completely different. They want it to be away from their religion. They want a separation of church to state, whereas Muslims a lot of the times don't. Islam is a complete ideology, right? It's got a political side to it, a religious side to it. It's everything. It's all encompassing. So these two ideologies trying to battle for control of their government, is that going to lead to something good? You think 50% of Christians are going to want to take living in a Sharia-run country? No, they're not. They're going to fight back, and there's going to be massive bloodshed and carnage, right? And like, for example, like Myanmar right now, that whole thing that's going on, and everybody's like, oh, they're all evil because they're kicking out the Muslims in their country, and there's like a genocide and all this stuff, and that is bad. There's a lot of bad shit going on there, but essentially that is what is going to happen in a lot of countries in the future, because the people, they'll let a bunch of Muslims in their country, and then the numbers will expand, and then they'll start trying to take control, and then eventually there's going to be fighting, and the nation, the community that let them in, is eventually going to have to try to expel them out, and it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to be just like Myanmar or something like that, right? And To avoid all that, let's not be bringing in a bunch of different cultures, radically different cultures that want things done differently, because it's not going to work out. You know, the only way that we could really have some form of diversity working out well is without having the government existing, because it's like a big pot of gold, right? If you can get it, then you have control of everything. You can impose whatever you want on the whole group. So of course you're going to have people fighting for that. It's always going to be on their mind. You're going to have all these special interest groups funneling money into the media and all this stuff to convince you to vote for this or vote for that, or vote for this person and support this, support that. You know, you're always going to have people trying to manipulate you, because yeah, within democracies there's always going to be that aspect of manipulation, pitting people against each other, saying that, like, well, if you don't vote for me, all those evil white people are going to take control, and they're going to, you know, kill all the brown people and all this shit, and then vice versa, right? You know, they're going to use this type of propaganda, which is just going to create more racism, more wedge issues, more instability within among people, which will cause more violence. But without the government doing that, without that big pot of gold for people to take control of, if it doesn't exist, there will be no point to spend tons of money to get people to vote or think a certain way. All people want to do is try to convince you to buy their shit, and want you to leave them alone, right? And that is probably one of the only ways people will be able to live kind of more side by side, because with the government there, it's never going to work. People are just tribalistic. They'll group together, and they will always side with people that look and are culturally more like them, and they always want to live in a country that is going to be more suited to them. So why wouldn't they fight for control of the government? Why would they just let somebody else take it? You know, this is humans. This is how we react. So we need to remove it to have any chance for the future. But you know, I got on a whole different rant there. But you know, Toronto is heading for disaster, and I hope things turn around soon. So you know, Faith Goldie all the way. If you like my content, subscribe and have a good day. See ya.